Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jen Maxey, Director of Public Programs at the Holocaust Museum, LA. And tonight we are discussing the fourth and final film in our Teicholz film series, Valiant Hearts, a heartbreaking film about a group of Jewish children who are hidden first in a castle housing precious artwork meant to be safe from the Nazis, and then forced into the forest. And the art historian in this film is based on an actual person from history, Rose Valland, who you will hear a little bit about in our discussion. I do need to let everyone know that our originally scheduled in-person screening of Whitebird next week has been postponed. So if any of you had registered for that for next week, note that we will keep you posted on a new date at some point in the fall. And thank you just for supporting our film series this year, which was focused on women in the Holocaust. And to view this or any of the prior conversations, please head over to the Holocaust Museum LA YouTube page. So for those not familiar with Holocaust Museum LA, we are the oldest and first survivor-founded Holocaust museum in the country. We were founded in the early 1960s by a group of Holocaust survivors here in Los Angeles dedicated to preserving memory, commemorating those who perished, and honoring the stories of those who survived. Our mission is always to inspire greater humanity through truth. So we're very proud to be at the forefront of helping to combat bigotry and anti-Semitism. And we do this through educational programs, exhibitions, and public programs that amplify stories and true histories of the Holocaust. And if you want to see just a sampling of what we're up to, please do give us a follow on social media. You'll get a steady stream of wonderful content there. We're honored to be joined tonight by Holocaust survivor Henry Slucki, himself a young Jewish boy in France during the Holocaust. Henry's story includes an escape with his whole family through the Pyrenees, where they made a dangerous journey on foot, eventually making their way to Spain. Henry's parents made the difficult decision to send him to the United States by himself as part of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's initiative to save refugee children. After the war, Henry moved to LA, where he became a professor of behavioral science. And we are so grateful for Henry's service to our museum, where he regularly shares his story with school children and public visitors. Henry is joined tonight by Rachel Podber-Kennison, who is the granddaughter of two Holocaust survivors. Rachel is the education programs manager at Holocaust Museum LA, where she works on engaging and meaningful programs for students across Los Angeles, giving them avenues to learn and reflect on the lessons of the Holocaust. She studied film and television at Boston University and then completed her master's in museum studies from the University of Leicester with a dissertation entitled Heirlooms Held Hostage: The Fate of Nazi-Looted Art in Museum Collections. So Rachel is here tonight to help give us all context surrounding the Nazi-looted art we see in the film. And our moderator tonight is Tom Teicholz, the founding curator of this film series, now in its 7th year. Tom is an award-winning journalist with regular pieces in Forbes, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and LA Magazine, just to name a few. He is also the son of Holocaust survivors, and our series is named for Tom's parents. And Tom, just let me thank you on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA for all your incredible work with our museum and with this series this year. It's been a pleasure. So Henry, Tom, and Rachel, take it away.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks for that lovely introduction. Before we begin, I do want to thank all our viewers who are watching tonight and who have watched all the films in this summer series. I also want to thank our supporters, the Leo and Rita Greenland Foundation, the Davidson Hooker Foundation, the Richenthal Foundation, the Nazarian Foundation, and the Zilka Foundation. If any of you watching have enjoyed these programs and feel so inclined to support this film series, please, you can donate through the Holocaust Museum LA's website. No donation is too small, as we like to say, and no donation is too large. We welcome either. Tonight's film, which we're discussing, is Valiant Hearts, a beautiful film that deals with 6 Jewish children who were hidden and then led to safety. in France during the Holocaust. During the French occupation. We are so fortunate and privileged to have with us tonight a survivor. Henry, I thought we would start by you telling us a little bit about your personal experience.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the invitation. Very, very quickly, let me go through my early years. My parents, who came from Warsaw in the mid-20s, settled in Paris and were very involved in the Jewish community, the Yiddish community, and were politically very active. So as a premature anti-fascist, as they used to be called, my dad volunteered for the French army when Léon Blum, the prime minister, called for extra support. As a foreigner, he could not be in the regular army, so he was in the French Foreign Legion and fought from the Maginot Line down. He was demobilized in southern France, and at that time of the occupation, in June of 1940, France was divided into occupied and unoccupied, but it was now called Vichy France, meaning that the capital was no longer in Paris. It was in Vichy, in the center of Paris, and the orders came from Berlin. My dad was demobilized, and we went and joined him, my mother and I being an only child, and we lived in southern France, in Montauban, near Toulouse, for 2 years before, and it was actually very peaceful, very, you wouldn't know that there was a war going on and that millions of people not far away were being killed. On August 26th of 1942, 6 o'clock in the morning, there's a knock on our door. It's the French gendarme rounding up Jews. We didn't answer. It was dark. They kept knocking, and we sat very quietly in the dark. To make a long story short, they finally went away an hour and a half later. Then a couple of months later, when Germany occupied all of France, we headed out on foot with Spanish guides across the Pyrenees. I was 8 at the time, and I remember it very, very well. And then when we got to Spain, now a new life was beginning for us. And within a year, Eleanor Roosevelt, as you mentioned, had created a program modeled on the Kindertransport, where children would go as a group and come to America without their parents. The American Joint Distribution Committee and the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society were instrumental in carrying this out. And so we took the train from Barcelona to Lisbon, and then the boat across the Atlantic, got to Philadelphia. We resided for about a week in a Jewish orphanage in Newark, New Jersey. And then the kids were put up for foster care. I had a great aunt and great uncle living in Washington Heights in New York City. And I was the only one of the group of 10 of us that got to stay with my family. And that's about where we'll end, because at this point, we're in the war.
Right. Thank you, Henry, for that. Now, you mentioned the French gendarmes knocking on your door in August 1942.
Right.
That's exactly when this story in
Right.
Valiant Heart takes place,
Right.
August 1942. And these 6 Jewish children are being hidden in a place that at first we all assume, or they all assume, no one is looking at, that is a hiding place, the Château de Chambord, which is one of the largest chateaus in the Loire region.
Right.
And it was in fact the place where they were hiding the masterpieces of the Louvre. Of course, it turned out that the Nazis were not just looking to find Jews, they were also looking to find the art which they wanted to loot and take as prizes for themselves. That gives me the entree to turn to you, Rachel, to talk to us. You're still muted, so please join us. Yep. And talk to us a little bit about the context of the treasures of the Louvre and the Nazi looted art.
Hello, thank you for having me. Sorry, I'm being hit with a sunbeam here, but I'm trying to move around it. So I think the context really of this film and kind of the backdrop of it is the massive theft of art that occurred during the Holocaust and during World War II. And it's something that has also happened in most wars through history. Treasures and cultural property are always targeted and taken as prizes or as just things to use as funding. For the Nazis, it kind of had multiple facets. It was used as prizes. Some paintings and some art was taken by Nazis for their personal collections. Some art was taken to gift to Adolf Hitler. Some was taken by Hermann Göring himself for his own private collection. And then other pieces of art that were taken, particularly art that was deemed as degenerate by the Nazi regime, that was sold through the black market and used to fund the war effort and used to fund the Holocaust. So across Europe, the approximate number is that 20% of the art in Europe was stolen by the Nazis, which is a pretty high number. In France, the number goes up. When speaking about privately owned art, particularly art that was in Jewish-owned collections in France, it's about 66% of that art was stolen by the Nazis. And we're talking about the Rothschilds collection and other major collections by very wealthy and well-known Jewish collectors. And museums were also a major target by the Nazis. As soon as they invaded a new country or place, they would go into libraries and museums, burn books, destroy libraries, destroy archives, destroy documents, and then go after the art. And France wasn't the first country they did that to, so France had a bit of a warning. And before France, or as France was invaded, the Louvre was shut down for 2 days under the guise of doing cleaning and repairs, and all of the artwork was taken out of the museum, which is an incredible feat. And if you look online, you can see photos of the empty galleries, which is kind of haunting to see as someone who loves museums, and I work in a museum. It's chilling to see an empty hallway at the Louvre. And those paintings were taken kind of all over. The Château de Chambord being one of the hiding places. For example, the Mona Lisa I think had 4 different hiding places throughout the war. And during the film, we see some of the art that was hidden at the Château de Chambord. So even though the part with the children being hidden there is fictionalized, but does reflect true experiences of children that were hidden, the art that was hidden there is accurate. And the Renoir painting that the children find and talk about, and one of them points it out as being a Renoir, and then later the character of Rose sees being taken into the truck, that painting was actually stolen by the Nazis from the Château de Chambord. and was put into, I think, the collection of Hermann Göring, and then was later recovered and returned. And then if I can talk about Rose Valland real quick.
Yes, that's what I was going to bring up.
Okay, perfect. So Rose Valland, who the character of Rose in this film is modeled after, she was a museum curator who worked at the Jeu de Paume Museum. I hope I said that correctly.
Yes, yes.
She worked at that museum, which is actually where the Nazis took all of the art they were stealing from across France. They used that museum as their collection point. And she was also working with the French resistance, and she was working with the Monuments Men, which was the group of soldiers within the Allies that were working to protect cultural property and art. And she did not tell the Nazis that had kind of invaded her whole life that she spoke German. And she would eavesdrop on their conversations. She would talk to the truck drivers. And she started making a list of all the art she saw coming into her museum, and would give that list to the Monuments Men so that they could track it down and try to find it. She did this for 4 years, which was incredibly risky to herself and anybody that she deemed dear to her. And she is credited with saving approximately 45,000 pieces of artwork.
Wow.
So it's an incredible feat that she was able to do this. And that is who the character of Rose in the movie is modeled after and based on.
And I just can't help myself from mentioning that she's played by Camille Cottin, who people may remember and love from Call My Agent, which she stars in, which is a French series that many people have watched. Now, Henry, I know that as a child, and as a child who traveled through France and who then was part of this group of children who came to the US, there were some things in this film which presents children of different ages, some of whom understand, some of whom don't. They're sort of Lord of the Flies like experience in their thing. Tell us a little bit what you thought rang true and what rang false to you based on your experience.
Well, thank you for the question, because I think not only as we now get into the content, we see a very tense situation. If you recall, there many years ago, the movie Forbidden Games, Jeux Interdits, was about a Jewish family, a couple and a little girl, who are on the road from North France to the south. The roads were jam-packed with people escaping to the south. So that was the general movement. And of course, you get that very much in the film, except that now we have a microcosm of a very small group, and it's very tense. Every step they take, you're not sure where they're going or if they're going in the right direction. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be found? And it may be a surprise that we don't see, except for in Chambord itself, we don't see Germans, for example, although I think there was a shot where they are in the forest with the children. So it's very tense and it's very well done that way. I was a little concerned that as a child at the time, and I remember seeing other children, we tended to be, at the very least, confused, not knowing what is happening. I mean, why are we leaving our residence? Why are we going through, be it woods or open fields, and going someplace that we have no idea where we're going? And who knows, maybe the adults don't know either. and there's a lot of confusion. So some of that seemed to be missing. That is, for example, the children splashing in the water, while yes, little kids will get very easily taken in by some frivolous thing. I didn't think that belonged there. I think especially little children would have been very tense and watching what the others are either telling them to do or telling them what not to do. But the story definitely holds. You're reluctant to leave the scene. You want to know what's going to happen next. Yes, from that point of view, it was extremely well done. I thought the juxtaposition of the looted art and the children being rounded up and so on was phenomenal, because here they are in the same place where the art is, and incidentally, I couldn't help but think, because I visited Chambord extensively, and you may recall there's one little glimpse of what's a staircase, and in the background, a large, in the middle of the palace of Chambord, the chateau, there's a staircase that must be at least, 30, 40 feet in diameter. But what it is, I hate to say it's a double helix. It's two spirals, staircases, one on top of the other, with the exits at opposite ends of the periphery. And that was designed, so I remember the guide telling us, so that the king could avert confronting the queen when he was leaving his mistress in one of the rooms. So I again, a very familiar thing for me. By the way, in terms of looted art, the Mona Lisa, one of the places that she stayed for at least over 2 years, was the town that we lived in, Montauban. And as I discovered just a few years ago, she was tucked away, packed safely in the basement of the Louvre Museum, INGRES, in Montauban. So Mona and I were neighbors for a couple of years. And also the Jeu de Paume, by the way, is attached. It's like next door to the Louvre in Paris. So it was right by a main boulevard and a big square where that would be a great place to accumulate and select out the art.
Thank you, Henry.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to highlight about this film is that it's directed by Mona Achache, who's a French-Moroccan woman. And I think it's interesting, during this series, we've had several films directed by women, and the question is whether there is a female sensibility to this film, and in the way that it approaches the children and their lives and that. And I thought, I don't know if you had any reaction to that, Rachel.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Oh, is my microphone misbehaving?
I think it was my internet went.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that this is a female-directed film, and I wanted to see if you had any reaction to the way in which the characters were portrayed and the story was told, whether that resonated in any way because it's directed by Mona Achache.
I think it does, and I think it has a bit of a gentler tone than some Holocaust-centered films can. And I kind of appreciated the way it found some moments of lightness, whether they were entirely accurate to what an experience like that would have been like. It did give kind of a moment of a breath of air from the kind of anxiety and claustrophobia from a lot of parts of the film. And I think with the characterization of Rose in it, I think that also benefited a lot from having a female director.
And one of the other things that this film makes clear is that different people make different decisions regarding aiding Jewish children and or aiding the Nazis, right? So we have Rose Valiant, who is seemingly cooperating with the Nazis, but actually is part of the resistance to them. And we have her colleague who can't bring himself to participate in the rescue of the children.
Mhm.
And we see the Nazis who may or may not care about the children being there. And so in this film, we see different levels within French society and within of participation, collaboration, and resistance. And of course, Henry, I'm sure that was very much your experience.
Yes, and of course, the overarching environment that is every day, moment to moment, threatening. You never knew if, number one, what you had to do, or if somebody needed to be helped, and number two, whether you would be found out and pay the consequences. And many people did. They helped, and then they were taken away and deported into camps, or for that matter, shot right on the spot. So this is very real. And of course, I remember after the war, people saying to me, you know, I mean, the Germans were our enemy, but I don't know if I would have had the wherewithal, the guts to do anything besides just trying to move away from wherever there seemed to be a problem.
Of course. I mean, you know, saving your own life is always, you know, the highest priority. But what I thought was great in this film, and what, you know, made it so, you know, dramatic, and the tension was that this person who really, Rose Valiant, who really seemed to have no affinity whatsoever for children, becomes the unlikeliest of saviors to lead them to safety, and eventually to be a distraction and decoy in the last moment to so that they can get to the safe point where they could then make their further transit. And I thought that was done. I thought that added a wonderful dimension to the film.
Yes, and of course, one of the things that I am very much aware of is that chateaus throughout France, and there are many, many of them, because it was not just the kings, but the aristocrats that would build a chateau were in fact the hiding place for the underground. The resistance actually, their headquarters would be at a local chateau, and it served the purpose of the resistance.
And Rachel, when you were studying these looted treasures, was there any sort of like sense of the cooperation of the French and of the French art historians in providing the Nazis with the treasures they were looking for?
I think it's kind of a mixed experience and response, and it also speaks to kind of the range of humanity, but also speaks to the incredible fear that the Nazis ruled with. If anyone was caught defying the Nazis, or not even just helping Jews, but defying them in any way, they would be deported themselves or killed on the spot or imprisoned in some way. So it's kind of there's a lot of gray zone. There were a lot of historians who were trying to save artwork, and there was an incredible concentrated effort to try to hide as much art as they possibly could. And they also split the art up so that if one hiding place was found, others might remain safe. But it is kind of I think a mix. But I prefer to focus on the people who tried their best to save it. I think those are the stories to tell.
I do want to remind anyone listening that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will try and get to them shortly. Henry, you mentioned that as many as 20,000 children were saved this way?
Yes, not just children, Jews, adults that came from France and crossed the Pyrenees on foot. The whole border between France and Spain is mountain. It's a mountain chain, and it goes all the way from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. So there are lots of places, and in some cases people went up one side and down the other. Most with a guide would go in between the mountains, so you didn't have that treacherous climb and the dangerous descent. But yes, and it's very interesting in our case that we had 3 Spanish refugees in exile from Spain living in southern France who had escaped from Spain at the time right after the Spanish Civil War. And so they were now guiding us through the Pyrenees, going south on the paths or the region where they had come from Spain north to France to escape.
And,
so
and
yes,
how old were you at the time, Henry?
8.
8.
Yes.
Wow.
And just as a little footnote, I just with a couple who are hikers in their 70s, very close friends of mine, last October, which means what, about 6 months ago, repeated that trek at the age of 88 and crossed the Pyrenees basically the same way as we had done it, except that now every night we stayed at a hotel in the Pyrenees and ate in a very nice restaurants. And our guide did have one of those 4x4 vehicles so that he would help us across in certain regions where maybe it was just too time consuming or too strenuous. But I did it.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story, Henry. That with an 80-year gap,
Yep.
you repeated the crossing there.
And by the way, there are companies that they call them Liberty Trek, and they take you across the Pyrenees in 4 days or so, and will give you a little bit of history about For example, in the time of Spanish Civil War, armies of Republicans of the democratically elected government of Spain escaping across the Pyrenees to France because Franco and the fascists were coming to get them. So it's very interesting.
Henry, there's a question for you. Did your parents survive the Holocaust?
Yes.
And
yes.
When were you reunited with them?
Two good questions. I left my parents in October of 1943, and my mother had a sister living in Mexico who had, with her husband, they had lived in Paris and left for Mexico in 1936, anticipating the disaster that was going to follow. And when they got to Mexico, they made papers for my parents and me. So from 1936 on, we could have left Europe and gone to Mexico, but we chose not to, as most people would say, we'll overcome this. We'll just get past it. So that so I did, we knew in France that we were going to leave and we were going to be going to a country where there would be an ocean. Many Jews went to Switzerland, but that's a landlocked country. So we had to go to a place where there would be an open port. So I ended up leaving from Lisbon, that is Barcelona, by train to Lisbon, and then the boat across the Atlantic in October of 43. My folks then wanted to leave Spain in early 44. They were turned down by the Franco government because a little known fact is that at the time of the Spanish Civil War, only 2 countries in the world supported the democratically elected government of Spain. One was the Soviet Union, and the other one was Mexico. All the other countries, except for the fascists, for the Germany and Italy and so on, all of them were neutral, hands off. So when my folks were making arrangements to go to Mexico, the Spanish government turned them down because they broke off relations with Mexico.
Wow.
So that the Joint and the Hayas came up with the strategy of doing triangulation. That is to say, they would have a transit visa. So the visa would be from Spain to Cuba. Cuba would get the transit visa so that people were coming in and then immediately leaving. So that was okay with them. And Mexico, they had the visas. So in early 44, my folks finally get their visas to leave Spain. They get to Cuba, and the visas that had been issued for Mexico in 1936 had expired. So they arrived in Havana and were stranded. And it was not until 1946, after the war, that we were reunited in New York City.
Wow, that is an amazing chapter of your story, Henry. Rachel, there's a question. Well, there's 2 questions actually about Rose Valland, both about the fictional liberties that the film takes regarding her. One person asks whether making Rose into this hero who rescues the children was in some way a way to rehabilitate the French, who were not always so heroic. And then someone else mentions that that the ending of the film makes you think that Rose might be apprehended and even killed by the Nazis, when she sort of diverts the attention from the children. And what do we think about this poetic license? And I think, first of all, we know that we know now a lot more about Rose Valland and how much she did help and participate in resistance activities and intelligence activities, both during the war and after the war, in the retrieval of looted art, where she played a very prominent role. Again, I had the feeling when I watched the film that she was symbolic of people who were reluctant to get involved, but couldn't stop themselves from doing the right thing. In the village of Chambord, the whole village rescued the Jews there. Obviously, the righteous Gentiles and the heroes were few and far between, but it's important to highlight the possibility of people behaving that way. And so I think they took that fictional license not in any way to whitewash the French participation in the occupation and the deportation of Jews, but just to remind all of us of the possibility of doing the right thing. At least that's my reaction. Do you have a reaction, Rachel?
I do. And I think that in this film, the character of Rose has the same name as Rose Valland and has the same glasses as Rose Valland and has the same kind of general look as Rose Valland, has the same job title, but I think it's a fictionalized version of her. The true life Rose Valland, to my knowledge, did not participate in the rescue or hiding of children. She was focused predominantly on art rescue. But there are several thousand French people who are recognized as righteous among the nations. I think the number is a little over 4,000. And I think it's representing stories of those righteous among the nations, people who did put their lives on the line to rescue children or Jewish families or a singular Jewish person, whatever their situation and story and ability was. My own personal feeling is that I would prefer to hear those true stories. I would love to have a movie about Rose Valland and her rescue of art, and I'd love to have a separate movie about children who did exist and were rescued and because there are so many incredible stories, and I'm very privileged in my line of work to be able to hear so many different survivor stories, including Henry's. And my own feeling is that I would rather hear and see those stories, and talk about the real experiences of individuals, because just when you think you can't hear a more phenomenal, jaw-dropping story of survival, you hear something new. And the incredible lengths people went to save one person or 1,000 people is always remarkable and always really blows my mind and gives me a little bit more faith in humanity and in humankind. So I don't know if this kind of the way this film was done was a way to rehabilitate their image, but I think if that was the goal, there are approximately 4,100 stories of rescuers that they could have chosen from. So I think this was trying to bring together stories of rescue and resistance and stories of art and art theft and art recovery and kind of put those two stories together in a way that would hopefully make sense in a narrative. But I'm holding out hope for a Rose Valland biopic one day.
Let me tack this on here. As you heard, I speak very often at various museums and schools and so on, and organizations. And I always emphasize that there were Holocaust survivors only because there were Holocaust rescuers. Had there not been rescuers, there would have been no survivors. We could not have done it on our own. Everyone who has a story, it's tied to what someone else did, went out of their way, came up with an escape plan. As I always like to say, even the person who did it on his or her own and survived by eating apples from apple orchards has to credit the for at least feeding them. It is, as I say, without the rescuers,
the perfect place to end our conversation. I am grateful to the rescuers, but grateful to you, Henry, and grateful to you, Rachel, for participating in this conversation. I'm grateful to all of you who tuned in and listened and watched these movies. As you heard in Jen's introduction, the film that we were going to show next week, White Bird, its release has been delayed because of has been postponed because of the Writers Guild and SAG actors strike. And so it's going to be released at a future time. Once we have a release date, we will surely have a preview screening of the film. And we look forward, that'll probably be an in-person event for those of you in Los Angeles, but we'll let you know about it. And we hope to see you next summer in the 8th edition of the Teicholz Holocaust film series. Thank you all and good night. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.